So I made a point this time of finishing it off. So it's really, all the lines a little bit more upbeat and a little bit more a few bigger songs on there, things that have got a chance of getting played on the radio, I suppose. So it's got a bit more dynamic.
No, don't worry. We're playing it. Yeah.
And then Foundling is the quieter sort of side of things. So it's a very understated record in places. I took the dynamic of quietness as far as I've ever taken it. I mean, I think the thing about working for so long in the studio is that you get very at one with, it's a bit like being on tour, it becomes very automatic to you. You start to think studio style musical thoughts, which are based more on what sounds good in there, like with the mics and everything, rather than just how you like to play and how you're comfortable to play and try and capture that. You start to play towards the sound that sounds good, and the softer you can hit the notes, the more they bloom onto the mics. If you just think of how a microphone works, this is boring technical stuff, but really, it's at the heart of making this record. So it's just a diaphragm in there, and when you chuck out a load of volume like I do when I sing full on, it just hits the thing really hard, and it sort of retracts for a moment and has to find a new setting for itself. So the sound all shrinks down and gets harder and smaller. But if you can just, record it with a steadiness and a certainty, but at a very low volume, and sing as quiet as you can and still get those notes, it blossoms in a completely different way and fills all the space that's there to be filled. Even just a piano and a vocal will just fill the whole tape up, and you just think it doesn't need anything else, or hardly does. So that was at the core of what I was thinking when I recorded some of these tracks, and they kind of got born in quiet moments in between working with the band on stuff, because we decided to record everything live. If we had 3 or 4 bad days, or days when we were working stuff out, it gets quite stressful when you've got nothing to show for it, like 3 days work and nothing at the end of it. And people, you start accusing each other, it was your fault, you were slowing down, but you should finish the lyrics, etc., etc. So you get yourself all tetchy. And it was good every now and again to go out, okay, it's Wednesday, take Thursday and Friday off and I'll see you on Monday. So then I'd have just the studio to myself, sort of thing. So it might be just me and the engineer. And I could either listen back to stuff, try doing a bit of overdubbing on it, or I could try a different acoustic version of a song, or just write in the quiet that was left when everyone was gone, because all the equipment was still set up. So it's like the feeling of everyone having just left the room was there, and it's like a nighttime feeling when the world goes quiet. So it's a nice environment to work in. So I felt like all the music of the previous however many months was all around me, and in that I would start to write, and always with a mind to recording. So anyway, that's how this record was born, and it's a quiet record, it's a band's record really.
Well, you've got plenty of those here today.
I must say I'm very pleased with it, and I think that my writing is to the fore on the whole thing. Obviously you get a lot of vocal and you get a lot of lyrics, because there's not much to distract from it.
It's absolutely beautiful, and I was very struck by you're a fairly young person to be thinking such deep thoughts about your own mortality. But there are things about the old chair and forgetting, which really, I told him last night I was listening to all this, and I was like, pretty much lost it, thinking about my dad getting old. And I think you have a little story about your grandmother sitting by a window. And
I mean, it's a sad story. Well, I find the whole thing very heart-wrenching. I mean, I know the world's full of sort of famine, chaos, disorder and suffering, but somehow when I see an old person sort of, and their loneliness, it hits me harder, especially if I know them. So it's just where we're going to end up. And she sits there with the lights on, not realising that everyone can look in a chair on her own. But the way that song, anyway, those images, those 2 songs, I suppose, forgetting not so much, but Old Chair is obviously very specifically about that.
Wasn't that a song that started out as about an animated dog or something,
Well,
and it turned into about old people.
Yeah, doesn't everyone write about
How did
it?
that happen?
I got approached to do some music for this animation thing, and it was in its infancy, and you never know, it could have become a huge global hit, and then I would have been going, but it didn't. Anyway, that was another thing I was doing all at the same time as recording the 2 records. But their working title was The Old Chair. And it was about these 3 dogs, and one's an old, they're all sort of orphan dogs, if you like, that have been adopted. And they've got their neuroses, each is individually sort of screwed up in its own dog-like way. The old one had this one chair that it used to sit on all the time. And it goes out into the garden one day, and when it comes back in through the dog hatch or whatever, the chair's gone and there's a new chair there. And the idea is that it's thinking, well, is that what's going to happen to me? I'm going to be replaced. So that was the idea behind the thing. And I just wrote instrumental music for the animation. I didn't think words were necessary.
It was beautiful, and you have a lot of strings.
I think it was just that it put the line, the old chair, into my head, and the thought of what they were trying to get at with this little story they were writing. So I sat down one day and just literally, it was a bit like how This Year's Love was written. I just played through da-da-da and just went, oh, the old chair, and then off we went. And the thing was written in about an hour.
Really?
And done, and then I cut it on my own, it sounded good, and then we put the drums on and cut it again. And that kind of knife edge kind of recording, but it came out great. And then just strings, really. And because there's so little going on, you can really, really hear the strings. It's
They're
probably
really
the biggest moment
harmonic.
on it. Yeah, it's probably
Yeah,
the biggest moment on the
gorgeous.
record, actually.
Well, I know you can't do that because there are no strings and the piano's low, but what would you like to play from Foundling for us?
Oh,
Yeah.
I was actually going to start with one from Draw the Line.
Oh, awesome. Let me guess.
And then,
You did it?
Yeah, that's
We're still